Senator Angus King also questioned Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard on whether or not classified information was shared on a text chain with top Trump officials.
Secretary Hegseth put into this group text a detailed operation plan, including targets, the weapons we were going to be using, attack sequences, and timing. And yet you've testified that nothing in that chain was classified. Wouldn't that be classified? What if that had been made public that morning before the attack took place?
Senator, I can attest to the fact that there were no classified or intelligence equities that were included in that chat group at any time.
So,
and I
the
defer,
attack sequencing and timing and weapons and targets you don't consider should have been classified?
I defer
or were
to the Secretary of Defense, the National Security Council on that question.
King also questioned Gabbard about cuts being made at the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency.